everything, rabbit and codfish cakes, deer liver, vinegary pickles. Why were they doing that? What was it about the time and the food that had them eating that way?
Yeah, I came to see the 19th century as this crucially important time. It's really the last moment in America where childhood pickiness didn't even exist as a concept. They were playing outside more. They were doing physical chores. Most Americans lived on farms at the time, so farm children were just involved in the work of the home. They often walked to school, and at the same time, they weren't snacking much. So they weren't, there just wasn't much edible food between meals. So children would typically come to meals hungry, sometimes really hungry. They hadn't eaten since lunch a lot of the time. Another thing that changed in the 20th century too was milk drinking. So starting in the early 1900s, nutritionists started saying milk is the essential food of childhood. Kids have to have milk to grow. And by the way, they hadn't actually been drinking that much milk in the 19th century because unless you lived on a dairy farm, there wasn't refrigeration. It was hard to get fresh, unspoiled, uncontaminated milk. So milk drinking hadn't been that common in the 19th century, but it explodes in the 20th century. The recommendation is that kids as young as 2 years old drink a quart of milk. That's 4 cups of creamy whole milk a day. And it really tamped down appetites for meals. So kids, would come to meals. They weren't exercising as much. They were snacking more. They were drinking large amounts of milk. And it really affected their ability to learn to like new foods.
There's so much fantastic, useful advice in the book as well that's based in history and in science. So this whole idea of sitting a kid down at mealtime and saying, you got to clean your plate, you got to finish the food in front of you. Should that be a goal? Is that something parents should do?
I'll just speak for myself. I never said you've got to clean your plate. But the idea that you should never tell a child to eat or that children should always decide the quantity, that's not a long historical idea. I think parents often have a better idea than children of what an appropriate amount is. And if a child has eaten very little at a meal, I think it can be appropriate to ask them to have 1 or 2 more bites or 3, depending on their age and what you see, especially if you're the parent and they say they're full and then 15 minutes later they ask for a snack. If you have that experience and your child, I do not think it is necessarily traumatic or bad to say hey, you haven't had dinner yet. You need to have 2 more bites and then we'll call that dinner.
Okay. If a kid doesn't want what's on offer at the table, should you offer them something else?
I am more radical than most people today on this. There are many pediatricians who say, no, but you can offer them fruit. I stuck with the historical method, 300,000 years of human history. And I didn't offer them any alternatives. But again, my children never once went hungry. I would always offer them the same food warmed up if they got hungry later. It always worked with my kids.
Okay, is it ever okay to offer a reward for trying a new food or eating less popular food? Like, hey, if you finish your spinach, you can have a cookie. Mm-hmm. Is that okay?
Psychologists in the 1940s and 50s said, no, don't ever reward your kid. They'll associate desserts with love and rewards. That they just made that up. There was literally no evidence. There were no comparative studies. Europeans and Americans have been having desserts after dinner for centuries with good outcomes. So to say, you can't have dessert until you finished your dinner, or if you finish your dinner, if you have 2 more bites, whatever you as a parent decide, you can have a snack afterwards. Or you can have a gold star or a sticker. I think those are incredibly great tools for